This is Damon, the head of the Church of Jesism, the Church of Father, Lord God Almighty, Jesus. It is Wednesday, September 21st, 2022, 2:37 p.m. As you can see, it's a sunny day. I don't know what the rest of the day is going to be like, but sunny now. Hopefully it stays that way. Okay, so I put this thing on a timer now and try to keep these things around 60 minutes, an hour. So I've timed it to 1 hour and 5 minutes, and hopefully I won't wear as much going over an hour. So this is video probably 36. Again, I've stopped even giving them a number because of all the part 1s and 2s and 3s and A's and B's and things. So, but anyway, it seems to be about 36. And I don't know the topic, except that I've been really avoiding the topic of sex and the matters of sex and sexuality, just about everything having to do with sex, because I've said it before, everything is fair game for a priest to talk about. You don't understand. A priest has to be able to be well versed in all walks of life, discussions, matters with problems, be it happiness or sadness or difficulties, or just running the gambit from everything that the human experience runs the course of. He just has to be well versed in it. He has to be able to talk about these things, to address these things when addressed by them, and then he has to be able to introduce them having not been addressed, because they are pertinent matters. Really, it's everything surrounds. The first thing this servant learned in any psychology course, was that I don't know why this servant hung on to this one thing, maybe 2 or 3 things that this professor said. And I guess except to say that Father, Lord God Almighty, Jesus really had my ears cropped at that time to hold on to just a very few things that were going to be pertinent to now. And that is, he said that every human being, and just about, I don't think he went on record to say every living organism, but he might have said something tantamount to that. I don't know. I won't misquote him. But he said at least every human being has a sex drive. And I thought about that while he was saying it. Just after he said it, I said, wait a minute. Now, you can't make a blanket statement like that. You can't make a blanket statement like that. Everybody has. And then I thought about it, and I thought, okay, well, I know I can speak for heterosexuals. They have a sex drive, that's for sure. Well, what about professors? And this is a long time ago. I mean, I don't even remember if it was high school or whatever. I don't remember which it was, but it was a psychology course, or it was a psychology lesson. Yeah, I do remember, actually. I almost remember the professor's name. So I thought about it a little bit more and thought, he may be right about that. Just on my personal opinion, not going around and checking it out and doing some searching to find out. He may be right. It doesn't matter who it is. Even people who seem to be not antisocial. That's an ambiguous word. Antisocial behavior and antisocial. They're 2 different things. I explained the antisocial behavior. And then I explained, maybe I didn't explain antisocial. Antisocial, period, without the behavior on the end of it, just means you don't really want to be around people. You don't gravitate towards people. You don't like it when people gravitate towards you. It's the opposite of exhibitionism. It's the opposite of people who are socialites, social butterflies, and the like. But the antisocial, he or she does have a sex drive. It's just it's inhibited because of their personality. And they have a healthy sex drive or lack thereof, just like anybody else who is otherwise or the same way. It's just that it's dormant because of their personality trait, this antisocialness, not behavior. Let me just summarize really quickly antisocial behavior. Antisocial behavior, you find most people who have an antisocial behavior, this is an action, not like some, how shall I say, non-aggressive, non-offensive, pretty much dormant way that a person who is antisocial is. Antisocial behavior is aggressive behavior on the part of people who, for emotional difficulties stemming from their childhood usually, and again, not their fault. You'll find that in a lot of my preachings, I'm going to preface it by saying, and it's not her fault, and it's not his fault, it's not someone's fault. But that doesn't make them not responsible for their behavior. Don't get me wrong. I am not saying people are not responsible for their behavior. In other words, and to take this to an extreme, people who let's take it to an extreme, and this could be a little grotesque, but bear with me and indulge me here just so you understand an extreme example. Somebody who goes around and let's just say they are and I mean, this is extreme, and I have to say it because this is what the Spirit brings to my mind to be safe to talk about the example. There are a lot of cases in history, mankind's history, where a family member has killed their entire family for whatever reason. But that doesn't mean, because they were either abused and made an emotional wreck or mess, that it's excusable behavior. Because guess what? Even though, let's take the scenario in which that family member was abused since yay high, couldn't even talk maybe, since the very beginning, because there are some more broken individuals in the world, Father God Almighty Jesus help them, than not. And they go unnoticed. They fly under the radar. Nobody knows about them because it's the best kept secret of the family that mom or dad or uncle or brother or sister, even not likely sister, because the aggressive trait behavior usually comes with testosterone. When it's a woman, she has an imbalance of testosterone in her other than estrogen, the Eileen Warnoses of the world. Although she's another case where something was done to her to cause her to off a lot of men. But this is similar, but not the same. This case in which a family member just annihilates their whole entire family, the innocent members of their family, they just snap. And I'm not talking about a case like, what are those two brothers who got rid of their parents and went on this crying fit, which didn't get past my radar. I don't know about anybody else. To act as though it was because they were abused when they were younger. I truly believe they were abused when they were younger, based on not their testimony, because that is, I just don't think, I think they started their acting bit in court because of their ulterior motive to gain riches by the death of their parents. And I think that was their driving force of emotion and motive, rather than what was done to them when they were younger. Now, I heard the testimony of some family friends and a house maid or a house servant, whatever she was called, who talked about certain things that happened to these two boys when they were younger. The father would go in and with one of them and not come out, and then there was just a lot of weirdness going on, and then the children were acting very odd. These are when these two grown men or younger but grown men who off their parents. I'm not going to say their names because I don't want to glorify them in any single way. I just want to use them as an example here, because we're not really talking about this example. This is an exception to the rule. It's not part of this rule, where family members, a family member or a couple or a number of family members conspire, get together, or if it's one, they decide after having snapped in a maniacal way. In other words, like they've just lost their mind invisibly, and like some individual kid usually who goes into, who's running rampant with some sort of a assault rifle and just kills anybody in sight, and then whatever it is their motives were, their motives were. That is an unconscious snapping, where a person has been building up to this for whatever reason in a conscious way, documenting it and everything, but when the time comes, they go into this full tilt mode where they're just blindly possessed. The day has come for their whatever annihilation they've been planning, and obviously this is all by the devil, all by an antichrist or the antichrist, but the antichrists, plural, work for the antichrist, which is the devil. We'll get into that. And I haven't gotten about these two brothers now. I'm just getting off on a tree limb here. Difference, a kid like that going into a school or wherever is a building, a public place, and just killing everybody in sight, which is sort of the order of the day these days. There is a reason for everything and everybody's behavior, but that does not excuse people from their actions or whatever they do. What? So somebody goes around and with an assault rifle goes and blows up or just annihilates anybody arbitrarily, indiscriminately, or discriminately, whichever. And this is what kills me about the jury system, in which we should not have. We should have professional jurors who should be judges. Should not be called jurors. They should be called judges. Get 12 judges up there and let them double duty, because they have gone to school to figure out how to judge impartially, supposedly. Now, because human beings are not perfect, not one, not even saving this individual, nobody's going to get it absolutely right. But you come doggone close when a person has gone to school to learn how to be impartial. Okay, so that's a jury system thing that it's a personal peeve with me that I've already spoke about in a video. I might speak in depth about it later or another time, but my goodness, we should be going to school to learn how to be a juror, to sitting in judgment over the fate of possibly an innocent person, possibly a guilty person, and you get 12 jurors up there, and half of them they're split down the middle, when anybody with a sane, logical mind, usually the judge, and whether they're impartial or not, remember, they've gone to school for this for a number of years to figure out, to circumvent their impartiality, because again, we may have certain things about our personality trait that we can't help disliking, and that may add up to and I personally cannot relate to this, because it has never ever been in this servant to fully understand in a empathetic way how somebody, anybody, can just simply dislike somebody and they, number one, don't even know them. But by virtue of whatever their group or lookalikes have done, that's good enough for them. I never understood that. Or just simply the way, just because they don't like whatever it is that this individual, could be their appearance, it could be the way they're dressed, it could be anything. I never was one to empathize with that understanding. I don't sympathize with it, and you know, in that I say that there isn't a person that isn't worked through either left hand or right hand via the superpower. And I've mentioned, you know what, as a matter of fact, I better get this disclaimer out of the way. I've already gone, you know what, I'll do it later because I got a signal. Just press on before I get off the topic, because I'm already out on tree limbs. I got to get that. Antisocial behavior, for whatever reason, people are acting out emotionally as though they are emotionally disturbed because of things that happen to them, usually very, very earlier on in life. Now, this does not, again, for the third time, exonerate them of all of the antisocial behavior that they display and impart to the world abroad, towards people in general. It does not. So for psychologists and psychiatrists to sit around and say, or even judges and juries to sit around and say, well, this is the reason why this person did this. What is the point of why someone did something? And even how often they've done it or not. If they've done it one time, or if and it's such an unbelievable thing. Now remember, nothing is unforgivable, but you got to read the Bible through. The King James authorized, that is. And it talks about punishments, about like 40 lashes for this. They call them stripes. But so you understand it. I mean, I think the world abroad knows mainly that, lashes is more popular than stripes. People don't know what stripes are, but the King James vernacular calls them stripes, 40 stripes. I mean, that's 40 lashes with the whip. And it was a flagellant. I mentioned that in the last video. They used to hand out punishments based on the crimes, even to the point of giving those who are in judgment of a crime the choice. Do you want to lose a limb? Do you want to spend some time working very hard, and that'll be a lot longer than losing a limb? Do you want to suffer in the public, being lashed 40 times in like the public square or something like that? They give them a choice. And then sometimes there was no choice. These things were done by the magistrates, and I'm talking about Judeo law here. I'm talking about Judeo law, which was Jewish law, which Christianity knows nothing about, because that's follower God Almighty Jesus doing. He just didn't want that for his time right now, in this present world, and since let's say the medieval times, when he was still on his throne, but we just didn't know that, follower God Almighty Jesus. So, getting back to it, antisocial behavior is behavior based on an emotional disorder or an emotional illness, which is an illness that, again, flies below the radar, so that a person can go about their life normal, just looking normal, acting normal, talking normal, get along with everybody, until possibly that one day that something causes them, or there's a catalyst, or something in their life, or someone in their life comes in their life and causes them to go off the deep end. A lot of times it's a mate. If it's a man, it could be a woman, or if it's a man, it could be a man, if that's what they're into. If it's a woman, it could be a woman, if that's what she's into. If it's a woman, it could be a man. A lot of times it's whatever strikes the emotional chord of the person to set them off and go ahead and do things that most people would not do, given the same situation of the catalyst. In other words, case in point, somebody who has antisocial behavior and doesn't know it, going to work, they used to call it going postal, because it used to be the postal service people that just snapped all this, and they couldn't understand why. Yeah, it has a lot to do with the pressure of the job and all that other stuff, but those assembly line workers used to have to go through the same. They didn't go out with an assault rifle and start blowing people up with bombs and mowing people down with assault rifles either. People who worked on assembly lines. And back before the turn of the century, the 20th century or the 19th century, people were working in workhouses, I mentioned a couple of videos back, for 12 hours a day. Even children, they didn't snap. By and large, they didn't snap. So it goes along with the morals of society and what people, if the morals are low in a society, then people are more apt to snap because they feel like they can get away with it. They start going down the road of thinking they can get away with it. Whereas maybe 50 to 100 years ago or 200 years ago, and everything obviously prior to that, a long way back, talking centuries here, people with high morals, talking about the Puritan days, high morals, when women used to dress from neck to the soles of their feet. And I am not asking for that to happen again. I am fully enjoying the visual effects of this day in terms of the female normalcy in what they dress in. But I will say, there is a lascivious way of dressing, and then there is a very discreet and modest way of dressing. I respect the latter more than I respect the former. It doesn't change the fact that I will lust as a male over the former, but I would respect the latter more so. I certainly wouldn't want my sisters going around it. Certainly foregone conclusion. I wouldn't want my mother going around in scantily clad outfits and things like that. But it is a different society. It is a different time. The morals are very, very low right now. So my point is, the higher the morals, the less people think they can get away with something. So they don't even begin to think and meditate on going postal. They don't even start thinking about that because they're living in a time where, oh my goodness, a thought like that would even come into my head. I am going to be hooked to shackles and stretched on the stretcher, or my head's going to be chopped off at the guillotine, or I'm going to be tied to some sort of stump in the public square. Everybody's going to be called out of their house to watch this as a lesson to all presumptuous would-be criminals that would do such a thing. And these things were light things. And they used to nip crime and malcontent behavior in the bud. They used to get on it right away. And then when I say they, I'm talking about moral society back then, which Father Lord God Almighty Jesus had in place at that time. He also has in place this immoral society right now, where the moral society is looked upon and frowned upon by this present day immoral society as a joke. It's like, oh my goodness, they used to swim in their clothes and call that a bathing suit. It was in 1901, a woman dressed from her chin. I'm not saying like the what is it called, occipital mapillary or something like that, like the base of one's throat where a tracheotomy is cut. Usually when someone has something in their airway, a passage has to be cut so that they can breathe. So it is right around the trachea. It's just the bottom of the neck. Women, I'm not talking about that, where someone lays a necklace, a tight choker on their neck. I'm talking about up to the chin. Women were dressed. They had like some sort of a turtleneck collar that came all the way out almost to the edge of the chin, and then they were dressed not even in a revealing way around the bust. It gave you a little curvature around the bust. That wasn't the case prior to that, and that was their getting away with a little harmless sin, so they thought at that time. I'm talking about 1901 or something. And then all the way down to their feet. And then they used to go swimming in that and call that a bathing suit. And not only that, there used to be this thing where it had a little ramp that led up to the shore, you know, like where dry sand is. There was a little ramp, and then there was this little outhouse looking thing. The ramp led up to the outhouse looking thing where the water, where you're getting into the shallow water. It's like, not an outhouse, I don't want to gross you out here. It's like a little standing closet. It had two doors. You opened one door that led to the dry shore. You went in, you took off your normal clothes. You got out of your normal clothes, which you were all bound and gagged like some sort of a mummy. And then you were ready to go out to swim when you had, like what we wear today on. Well, now we don't even wear what they went out in today on. When you were dressed from the top of your neck all the way down to your feet in one frock or dress. This is how the women used to dress in 1901 to go swimming on the beach. From the top of their neck all the way down to your feet. I'm not asking for that. I'm just telling you the way. I'm talking about morals here and where they've gone and how they plummeted. And what they used to hold sacred, and this is all Father Almighty Jesus is doing for his reason. I'm going to get back to the antisocial behavior. Oh my goodness, I hope I don't go under. I'm already a half hour in. All right, look, I got to get to it. Finishing that, women used to dress up in an entire dress and call that a bathing suit and then go swimming. And heaven forbid you come out of the water and the water weigh your clothes down and you show everything revealing, nipples, everything, cleavage. You're practically, it's now a see-through dress. They didn't do that. Most of the time these dresses were black, number one, and most of the time these dresses had something under them so they could be nothing revealing, not any kind of genitalia or form of genitalia. I'm talking about 1901 women now when they dressed to go swimming in what was called a bathing suit. Fast forward all the way into the 50s, forget it, everything went for broke. Talking about the Virginia Mayos and the girl from Jones Beach or something like that, and she was dressed in a bathing suit, or was it even a bathing suit? She didn't even go in the water, but you know how it went from a dress to 3 strings, which we call a thong. So this is where the morals have gone and come from. And whether or not, as a lusty man, I like it or not, this is not the thing that is advantageous for the things, the gifts that are virtues that people want and desire, and the best of everything and all this. So, conversely, the things that are not advantageous or not virtues, we don't know because of the society we're living in. Think of a man with a time machine, which I explain, time travel is illogical, period. I won't go into why, I've already said it. But just because that's one of the fictional depictions we love to entertain ourselves with, whether it was Time Machine or Time After Time or something like that, in which we see these people going back in time and they go back to these ancient days and wherever the morals were different and all that. And one goes back and goes to a beach in 1901 and they're all shocked that somebody is like going to swimming fully dressed. Or that person comes from 1901 or 1800s and goes into the future and sees us here walking around, or our women walking around in thongs, and goodness gracious, what do the poor prostitutes have to wear? Or the women who put themselves on film. Those poor girls have nothing to wear now, or nothing to walk around in now and be called sexy or something like that. So if the normal average everyday woman is walking around in things that I'm venturing into territories I probably should not. And this is one of the reasons I was trying to avoid this topic of sexuality and sex. And because number one, I don't want to hurt anybody. I don't. It's not my interest to hurt anybody. I don't speak maliciously. Even before the new man, I never really did. I saw a lot of things funny and thought, like for instance, homosexuals used to, now as a priest of Jesism, when I go about preaching, I find invariably homosexual couples see me because I could be in cloth. Usually if I'm in cloth, or they see some sort of a headgear that they know is religious, or let's just put it away. I'm not in civvies at the time. I'm in civvies when I'm not preaching. But if I'm preaching, just like any other, like a Catholic priest or anybody else, they usually are in the cloth. They usually have their uniform on. And this is the same thing with this servant. I will definitely have my uniform on. And I can't understand why people say, why do you dress in robes? I said, well, I just came from preaching. And you wouldn't ask a Catholic priest that, would you? Because you know that I'm not Catholic or whatever, because you Yeah, just ask the Catholic priest that, and Catholic priests usually go around in the same garb and preach in the same garb a lot of times. They just wear different colors, as this servant wears different colors. But there's a distinction between civilian clothes, civies, and the cloth, wearing the cloth. When one is ministering the priesthood and teaching and preaching and laying hands on it, he should be bearing linen robes and a linen mitre on their head, and then everything is consecrated. It should be white. I mean, everything white, and everything. Not only is he consecrated, clean, having washed his feet and done all of the other things to cleanse himself, then he can go out and feel confident that the Holy Ghost is speaking to him, the Spirit of truth is speaking to him. But when he's done with that, he has to lay those cloths in the chamber, the ministry chamber or the church. And then he gets into his civies and he goes out. But he can't trust himself by laying hands on people and praying for people, because he may not be fully cleansed, and he doesn't want to give anybody anything that he left on the altar, let's just say, or he doesn't want to give anything to anybody that he didn't cleanse out or didn't realize it. And when I say a priest is a little bit impure, that really doesn't mean that he's defiled or he's dirty or he's got devils or anything. That's just, you got to understand the bar that a priest has to be clean. For a priest to have one or two devils is really nothing comparatively to the parishioner who has, I'm not going to put a number on it, but they're looking to get rid of a whole lot more devils. And again, there's no crime to have devils, because most of us, or I'll say all of us do, but it's just a matter of a number of them. So anyway, so the servant will be preaching, and someone will say, man, how many tangents am I going to go on? There's so many things in my head that I want to talk about, and then I start talking about these things, and they take me off onto these, goodness, I got to get back. I guess Father Lord God Almighty Jesus escapes me of all of wherever I was going. And he took me there to talk about them lightly, so then I'll get back to the point. This antisocial behavior, as opposed to being an antisocial. The antisocial behavior is one thing. It means it's a negative mood behavior. People call it bipolar. Schizophrenia to a greater degree, multiple personalities to a greater degree, in which psychologists and psychiatrists will tell you there are literally different personalities in a person, and they come out like this Sybil person that literally existed, and there's a new movie depicted on her. Those things are real, but psychologists and psychiatrists have their label for it: multiple personality disorder, schizophrenia, this 3 faces of Eve thing. That's another real life true depiction of a woman who had 3 personalities, literally 3 people in them. They had different personalities, all of them. All of them usually have different personality traits. But here now, think of but religious people or spiritual people or priests or pastors or ministers who have this understanding, certainly a Jesite priest would, that these are, you can pass them off as multiple personalities or just bipolarism. But these are literal devils that take hold of a person, and they get so much control of a person. And I touched lightly on this, trying to be in control of this joust between the good spirits in you and the bad spirits in you, which come with your flesh. Again, I always preface this by saying the spirit, the person, you are perfect and not evil in any way. You're all good. The spirit. But when you put on the coveralls, the overall, which is the flesh, that is the thing that has either a normal balance of good or an abnormal balance of evil, or something like right in the middle, or it just depends on whomever. have examples of, we have an example of a litany of people in history who we all, you know, household names like the son of Sam, the 44 caliber killer, and I've talked about Richard Ramirez and people like that. And you know, for a priest to be talking about people like that, and then people to be sitting there wanting to look for fault with the priest for citing people who have done heinous things in their life and want to say, oh, why does he always concentrate on these murderers and serial kinds of people who've done evil things? Oh, well, why not? You have to address evil as it is in order to extract it, not only from the person or persons that you're talking to, but the world itself. There isn't a time that follower God Almighty Jesus didn't address evil as to what it was, who had it, and now get rid of it. There wasn't a time. I can cite you almost every parable that he spoke about. It was laced with addressing evil. So don't just sit there and talk about, well, he keeps on talking about these serial murderers and Ted Bundy and all the rest of them. And that's right, because I don't want to get personal and start talking about people that are living today and maybe hearing these things, whether they're bound and gagged somewhere where they can't function in normal society. I don't even want to offend them. I'll use the examples that brought them. All right, so you just be happy. I'm not talking about you if you're incarcerated somewhere because you've done lopped off heads of 5 people. So you got to address evil. One has to. If they're going to bear the cloth, address evil, what it is. It's the same thing as a doctor addressing the cancer, telling the patient about it. It's what you got. This is how we're going to get rid of it if you're going to sign on to it. Same thing a priest does. You go into that confessional. If we're talking about the confessional is synonymous to a Jesite priest, in that they will take confessions in a different way, totally different way. It isn't like you get a rosary. You're gonna go. I'm gonna tell you, yeah, you're forgiven. Go say Hail Mary 10, 15 times on your rosary, and light a couple of candles, and you're good to go. That's not going to happen with this priest, this servant of Jesism. I want to say what would happen, and you'd just have your choice. I'll tell you lightly what the Bible used to do in terms of if you didn't want to take the priests, plural, of Judaism back then, who were Pharisees usually, or Sadducees. Their edict that went down with a criminal that the townspeople brought to the magistrates to have judged because they had committed a crime, like they brought Mary Magdalene. Or if it wasn't that, it was like either thievery or murder or whatever it is that we all do. I mean, I'm talking about humanity does. So they bring this person before the magistrates. There were no police. Yeah, there were police. They were every male in the society. Sort of like how Jerusalem does, Israel does it today. You got to do 2 years in the armed service, and I think they have some sort of a service for local watches. Any neighborhood protects its own neighborhood. And then abroad, this is the way of the preservation kind of thinking of humanity. So the priest used to lay down the edict of, oh, this person, you don't have a choice. Your crime is such that we'll choose for you. You're going to get 40 lashes. You're going to be like Quasimodo, tied down in a public square on a stump. We're going to tear your shirt off, and we're going to give you 40 lashes. And you're going to sit there and you're going to take it. If you die, then that was the will of the God at that time, the God of the Old Testament. If you live, it was his will that he was merciful and he let you live, and you're going to have 40 lashes to prove it. Okay, so that was that. And then if you didn't want to do that in society today, just to get these cancers out, a priest has to address these things. So if in a confessional people confess their sins and things like that, you have to give a sacrifice. Whatever your crime is, let's talk about a light crime, something like you stole like kids steal candy bars and things, like you stole a candy bar from the candy store. You're not a kid, you're an adult. You swiped the candy bar, you couldn't help it, it was there. and nobody was watching. The cameras were pointing in another way, or so whatever it is today that people give themselves as to why they think they can get away with something. So, all right, that's a light crime. This is just an example. A light crime like that, you would have to repay for the candy bar, and then you would have to make amends if we're talking about Judeo law, Mosaic law, which was probably Christian law in the 1st century, 2nd century, and then the medieval times, the Puritan times. You were given a choice. You decide what you want to give up, but it's got to equal whatever it is that you have done. You got to make restitution first, and then you got to, on top of that, give some sort of an offering. This is talking about the free will offerings and things like that. A show of good faith, a show that you won't do it again. These are light things, and then you can escalate somebody taking a candy bar with paying the $1.25 or whatever a candy bar is first, and then you pay on top of that a restitution, $5 for your troubles, $5 for, so you paid a whole $6.25 for a candy bar that you thought you could get away with just taking. This is just an example, a very light example. Now you escalate that exponentially to some bigger crime. You, according to Judeo law and Mosaic law, you would have to make restitution, and then you would have to pay on top of the restitution. That's the thing. Now, there were times where restitution wasn't enough, even if you had it, according to whatever your crime was. Like in the case of this family person who just killed their whole family, how's he going to pay for that except to be put away? And I just love hearing people say, oh, but what about forgiveness? And what about all this other stuff? I started out by talking about, yeah, sure, there's a law of forgiveness and all that. But then there's the law of an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth and a life for life. People seem to conveniently forget that. So you would not like it if somebody just annihilated your whole whoever or whatever. I mean, usually when we're walking in the same shoes as some victim, then we can understand, oddly enough. That's usually the case. When people can't understand, can't feel somebody else's pain until they're actually feeling it themselves. This psychopathic behavior that a lot of antisocial behavior is displayed of. So of course there's forgiveness, but a person is responsible for the behavior of the person, irregardless of why. Do not talk to me about, yeah, but like some silly juror would say, this is the reason they're voting for not guilty. Because when they were a child, such and such did this to them. What? Well, there's a woman in a lot naked being with chalk, or just being drawn around and inspected as to what evidence there is as to how she died, and it all adds up to him or her who killed them. And you're going to talk to me about what happened in her childhood? The woman is still dead. So let's get real. And then you got 6 more of those, and then 7, and make it a hung jury or something, or total exoneration. Usually people are hung up on doing ill things, or just bent on bad behavior, are the ones that are defending each other and have problems with, all of a sudden they got a problem with people who are unforgiving. You mean jurors are unforgiving? They don't even know you. They got a job to do. Judges are unforgiving? They got a job to do. Who do you think put them in place but Father God Almighty Jesus? And they, in a society without, like a government, which is not labeled by a religion. A government is labeled by simply that. A government, by which people govern themselves. And in order to do this, they have a setup. I mentioned this before, but we're going to get it it's a different reason here now. when you have judges, jury, and law enforcement to begin with, and then the law enforcement goes through the whole gambit of the regiment of making sure that someone is seen to judgment. The judgment part of it happens with the judge and the jury. It all makes perfect sense. And even if you're hell-bent on doing hell towards other people or yourself for inexplicably your world, even if you're hell-bent on doing that, I think you would see through the thicket if it was you that it was being done to. Like, a lot of people, I won't say everybody loves their mother, or loved, past tense, their mother, if they do not have the fortune to have them still in this present world with them. Most people do. And that's usually what strikes a chord with a lot of people indiscriminately, whether they're criminally minded criminals or negative or hell-bent on doing evil, or they're good for the most part. I mean, there's no perfect person, so I can't say good, period, and leave a period on the end. I say good for the most part. Whether they're good or evil, for the most part, on both sides, because even the evil aren't totally evil. I mean, it's just the things they do. Sometimes that we may do, we may go off the deep end with evil, and for a moment, and the devil has taken us over, and we're in possession at the time, and for that moment, we can't believe what we did. But that doesn't change the fact that it happened. And it was your body that was used to do it. Whether or not it was the Antichrist or one of his henchmen to do the duty inside of your body, manifesting itself through your body, is inconsequential. It used your body, and guess whose name has that body, and vice versa. And guess who's going to get blamed? Because they can't see the devils, the judges, the law enforcement, and the jurors, who are going to be standing over you in judgment of you. Rightfully so. So, I can't say enough or emphasize enough how it literally sickens me to the core to hear people say, yeah, but this is what happened to them, and this is what happened to them. Think about it again. Do you see what they've done? This is not something that's forgivable and then pardonable. There's forgivable and then there's pardonable. And then let's talk about the repeaters, the ones who are repetitive offenders in whatever it is they do. Does not matter about a spiritual understanding of something, or matter that the devil is keeping them doing these things. They do not want to do them themselves, because the spirit themselves are perfect and good, all good. The fact that they have the coverall of the body on them and that these devils cause them to do these things, inconsequential. The spirit in the body, this coverall called flesh, this overall called flesh, is going to get blamed. And unfortunately, rightfully so, because we cannot see the human. Mortal man cannot see the entities in our body that cause us to do whatever it is that we have done and wound up doing. We're at 48 minutes, so I got maybe 12 and 17 minutes or something before this thing goes off. Average everyday man and woman can't see the judges and jurors and the law enforcement. They can't see what caused you to do whatever it is you've done, what is in our flesh that causes, even the judges, the jury, and the law enforcement, they're in flesh too, and they're subject to error as well. So sometimes by their own colleagues, they might be carted off for having snapped. I'm talking about judges, jury, and law enforcement themselves. Nobody is perfect. Evil is indiscriminate again. It does not say, oh, you're a police officer, so I'm going to leave you alone. I'm talking to evil here, evil entities. Oh, you're a judge, so I'm going to leave you alone. You're going to be all good. We can't touch you. Oh, you're a juror. You're going to be judging over people. You have to decide on lives, the fate of people. Oh, this is evil talking. You know, we're going to leave the jurors alone. You're going to be all good. No, it doesn't work that way. Every single body that is anyone in a body has devils and angels, both in our flesh, and there's an ongoing joust. Now, there's a generational sin that goes on that people do not understand, but it is real. It is truth as well as real, as part of the template as to how sin and evil gets handed down by generation. Let's take a present day person who does not know why they were born the way they were. Let's talk about evil people, Charles Manson. My working knowledge of that individual, he was born with a crooked mother, maybe wasn't even his mother. A lot of people born that way. A lot of people have had that problem, but that's not their fault. Whatever their actions are there afterwards, are there from the time they were very young and might have stabbed a brother or sister and maybe killed them or not, to the graduation to defiling and mutilating animals and torturing animals, to the graduation in sin to killing and torturing and mutilating and destroying people. From the time of their inception, although wasn't their fault that they were born into sin by their mother and their not their mother, it's only the father. And we'll get into why it is not the mother or the woman's fault, and why generational sin doesn't get heaped up on the woman, the mother, why the responsibility for her sins in the present life that she lives is not carried on to her children. We'll get into another day. But it is the father's sins. It is the male sire. It is his sins that count or not. Or it is his goodness that counts or not. As to whether his seed that comes out of his stem, which would be his penis, to be graphic, which comes out of his sperm, that's where the life comes out of. And how it gets in there is via water. And how it gets in the water is the same thing as amoeba and paramecium. I won't go into going reverse and forward in this so-called evolution of how things are done. But remember, one is an appearance, a facade, and then the other is the truth. But it just so happens the appearance and the facade jive with the truth, with how a spirit gets into a male. It gets in first through every male is going to need some water at some point. And that's how the spirit gets in, through the water. And water is created by H2O. And we'll go into that another time. And what is that? That is firmament. And that is something else that I'll mention later. That causes the life to take form in what is a beginning flesh. If you think of an amoeba or paramecium, it is the outer, the cell. Outer, like if you're drawing an amoeba or paramecium, that line that you trace out that imperfect shape of an amoeba or a paramecium, that is the beginning flesh. And it's translucent. You can see through it under a microscope, but the outer line, which is the same outer line that you can see in sperm, which has a gyrating, swiggling tail. And by no coincidence, the head of it, the sperm I'm talking here, is lit up. Light form we're talking here. This is a life we're talking about. And is moving like a tadpole. All right, you figure out all those things, and we'll get into it in another video. So the crimes of the father, the male sire of his life, are going to be handed down, revisited to his children, his seed, whether he knows his children or not. I mean, he could be a sailor in port, taking in a little, a good time for about 15 minutes with somebody he doesn't even know, and having paid for it, and he'll never know who his seed is or was or ever will be. He'll never know. You go, it's the same as that. And those children will never know him either. Maybe even never know the mother. But again, remember, the mother, whether or not she's in one kind of life as opposed to another kind of life on both ends of the track, or sides of the track, is inconsequential as well. Sometimes a child doesn't know where they came from. And this isn't And nothing this servant is should be offensive to the logical and understanding, or I'll just, and maybe not understanding, but more logical thinking. If you're going to be an emotional being and emote over everything, what can I say? What can I do for you? I can't. What's it going to make? That's going to gag me now? I'm not going to be gagged by some emotionalist. I can't be. Some things are hard to hear. They have to be spoken. So I started talking about sexuality and everything. This antisocial behavior is very different from antisocials. Antisocials just don't want to be around people. That's all. So that does not make them not have a sex drive. And we're coming up on 55 minutes here. Got about 10 minutes to talk. Everybody has a sex drive. You see, I go back to the tree trunk here. That's Father God Almighty Jesus. I was way out on all kinds of tree limbs and little branches, even leaves. And he gets me back to the focal point. It's not a servant. It's not anybody. It's not man's doing if he does great. It's not man's doing if he does bad. But he's responsible for the one, and he usually heaps glory upon himself for the other, but he shouldn't. So Father God Almighty Jesus gets his servant back to the tree trunk of it. Everybody has a sex drive. So said that psychology teacher, and it is true. Homosexuals, this is why I was very reluctant to talk about sex and sexuality, because I didn't want to hurt homosexuals, and I still don't. But I have to say this, because I started out to say homosexuals put on, when they see this servant in cloth, they put on a show or display because they think that I'm against them automatically. Oh, he's a Christian, thinking I'm a Christian. He's got some kind of a cross on. He's got to be. So they put on a display of being offended without my having even to explain, number one, what my religion is, what it depicts, what the trueness is of Jesism as opposed to Christianity, and what the Bible says and all the rest of it. So not their fault. I'm talking about a homosexual couple when this servant is usually in public just relaxing and not preaching. And a lot of times I sit somewhere where a whole lot of people, I just like to look at people and see the beauty of all just the differences in all of the people of the entire world. It's usually in Manhattan, but wherever I am, I like to sit and look at people and places and things. It's just my favorite pastime. And pastime means how you pass the time, and I love to do that. Just sitting in, even above talking to people. I can be very loquacious in talking. That's Father God Almighty Jesus' way with me, that I am enabled to speak his truth. But boy, oh boy, for weeks on end, I may not utter one single solitary word, depending on where I'm at. And it's not some sort of an observance of some kind of a muting of this servant or not. It's just a way or mood or feeling. Or it could be the surroundings that this servant might be in, that it's not conducive to be talking, not conducive to even utter a word, or if even a sound. That's in depth. So anyway, invariably a homosexual couple will start putting on a display. I can see them coming. They don't even see me see them coming. And they see, one of them sees me, and they'll whisper to the other one, giggling like two girls. No offense in that they're halfway there or anything like that. It's because heterosexuals will do the same thing. Wonder what this person is about. Oh, what is he? Some sort of religious figure or something? And then want to take note, and then they take the first seat they can find. I'm talking about a heterosexual couple or a homosexual couple. But the heterosexual couple feels no need to put on a display of affection in front of this servant. They feel no need to, because they know, or if they're thinking I'm Christian, which is not the case, I'm Jesite, of Jesism, but oftentimes, obviously, and for good reason, they're thinking I'm Christian, especially seeing something, the name of Father God Almighty Jesus, somewhere, either on this servant's person, or handing out flyers or whatever it is, so they'll think it's Christianity. Heterosexual couples don't feel a need to put on an emotional or affectionate display. as though it's feigned, like, oh, look how we love each other. But homosexual couples do, because they're already out of the gate offended by Christianity and what Christianity thinks about homosexuality. I am not one such individual that is offended by homosexuals or even their behavior. Now, I must say, prior to, you got 5 minutes, prior to this servant's walk in this life, the old man, although he was, he was a different guy. He was a different guy, and when he was a child, like all children do, a lot of children do, most children, they make fun of something they can't understand. Because whatever it is that they're making fun of or take part in making fun of, maybe not actively, which is probably the case with this servant, I just really actively, even as a child, could not sit around calling people names so that they could hear them. But we're at the times, thinking back, where it was no offense and was no harm to be talking about the way some effeminate person was acting. If like the 10-year-old or 12-year-old saw that there was no way that person was in earshot, with their friends, their little schoolboy or girl friends, they might take part. They might. The servant might have. I'm going to sit here and try to go back and search the memory banks for if I did or not. I'll just say that I won't say that I didn't. But I've never been one to call anybody anything in front of their face, and it's not their fault that they're such a way. And that it's just a condition of the way Father God Almighty Jesus made them. So just to say this, we're at 101, because I'll stop at 105. You know what? If it doesn't stop, I might just... No, I'm going to have to stop it and take up another video. So quickly, in 3 minutes, homosexual couples, they start kissing and slobbering it all over each other and really overdoing it. Like they're trying to gross me out as best they possibly can. And it's all that I can do, this servant, to keep laughter back, because that would really offend them. And then they think that now he's laughing at us now. He not only hates us, he's laughing. They have already gone with the foregone conclusion that I hate them or despise their way or their being or their sexual preference, because they've assumed that I'm Christian, or assumed that by biblical understanding or something, there's something wrong with them. So then they accentuate the negative that's already in their head, you see. So they went out of their way. If I can, sometimes I get the unction to literally walk up to them and pull them apart from each other. You got to pry them apart from slobbering over each other for a display for this servant. And say, you don't have to do that. No one hates you. No one is even thinking a wrong thing about you. And I'm gonna say this really quickly, because I got 3 minutes to say it. The Bible never ever, nor Father, Lord God Almighty Jesus, never ever, nor any of his disciples in the apocryphal books or in the original canon of the 27 New Testament books or the 66 in totality books, never ever said that there was something wrong with being homosexual. It only tells you, the Bible, that to act, not even talking about behavior, I'm talking about the act of coming together with same and same, is what the Bible, I'm talking about